Hi, everyone, and welcome to our wsTOOLS webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about our transfer tools. There's a select cost transfer, which starts out in service, and there's a select job transfer, which starts out in job cost. And so both are very useful tools, and we're going to talk about when customers would use them today, as well as how to use the tools. So let's jump right in and take a look at select cost transfer. First, just some highlights here of select cost transfer. When would you use this particular tool? Let's say you made a mistake and you accidentally posted costs to the wrong service call. I know it could happen, right, to everybody. Or maybe your practice is that you have service calls that you create to do, let's say, installation for your jobs. So once you've done your installation and you want to transfer those costs that got posted to that service call, you want to transfer them over to your job because that's where you accumulate all of your costs and keep track of that information for a long-term job, 3 to 6 months or longer. So this particular tool will allow you to transfer costs from service call to service call or service call to a job. So pretty cool. And again, we're going to allow you to pick and choose which costs you want to actually transfer. And that's what makes this tool unique versus what's already in your signature product. And we'll take a look at this one in more depth here after I talk about select job transfer. And that's the next one up here. And this one again originates in job cost. So it's going to be taking your posted job cost transactions and transferring them from one job to another. And again, you don't have to rekey them. You can just get them transferred from one job to the other. There are some restrictions in the sense for both of these tools of if it's a labor transaction, you have to transfer it into a labor cost code over on the job cost side. You have to maintain that cost element as you go from one job to the other. But you could go to a different cost code if you wanted to. And then we have some exciting news to share as well on our next slide. We have a new part of select job transfer coming out that's called job cost historical. This one will allow you to transfer historical transactions, but in the sense of we're not going to actually transfer the physical transaction itself, but the cost that goes with those transactions based on the different cost codes can be transferred from one job to another, and it's just going to be creating a general journal entry for those costs. But again, it would transfer it from the job from one to the other. Because of job cost and its month-end procedures, we can't physically move transactions that have posted into historical months because that could change your POCs and throw things off. So again, it'll just be doing a journal entry in the current period for those costs. But we will allow you to view the transactions to see what costs were posted and specifically identify which ones you want to transfer from one job to another. And if you have questions as we go along, because I know that can be confusing, please enter them into the question panel or to the chat window. And we have Sandy along the way with us. Say hi, Sandy.
Hello. Hello.
Sandy is watching those, so she will be answering those questions as well.
Yep.
All right, Sandy, I assume we don't have any yet.
Not yet.
All right, well, let's get in the product and take a look at these fun tools. Let's bring up the select cost transfer. And Sandy, you should be able to see this now. I'm in GP.
Yep,
Is that
I sure can.
okay? Excellent. That's always a good sign when you're doing a demo. Well, here, I'll clear this out and start from a fresh screen. And this is located under transactions for service. And it's the last option here, select cost transfer. In this window, you'll see there's lots of filtering options here up at the top. And again, lots to choose from. And you could choose just one. You can choose to fill in all of them. And we're going to go ahead and just bring up one customer and click redisplay. And like I mentioned earlier, you could put in specific location codes, service calls, and it would use those filters and dates and apply them to what transactions we're going to pull in here across the bottom. And these are the transactions we're going to be able to select from in order to transfer to another service call. You can limit what you see down here also by selecting what cost code here on the right-hand side you pick on the top. So let's say you know it's a labor transaction that you want to transfer and you don't want to see all the noise of those extra transactions. You could unmark those checkboxes and click redisplay. And then you'll notice all we have now are labor transactions that are listed down here on the bottom. Again, very helpful filtering, especially if you have a large volume of transactions based on your criteria that you're searching for here on the left. So we'll bring all those transactions back though, because I want to point out a couple more things about all the types of transactions down here at the bottom. So you'll notice that it's listing them by service call ID. Down here is you can choose to sort how you want the window sorted. So I'll say service call ID. I'm going to click redisplay. As well as I'm going to expand the window. You'll see there's 4 lines up here in the heading. And when I expand out, it goes from 1 line to 4 lines for each one of the transactions that are listed in this window. And depending on what type of transaction you have, it will list in, fill in the different fields for you. So for example, this first one is payroll transaction. So it's going to have employee name, number, etc. listed in here. The second one here is a purchase order transaction, and that has vendor information filled in here on the 4th line. Sales transaction, here we got a line item that we were selling. And so again, you'll see the different types of transactions will fill in different lines. Here's a payables transaction, again, filling in the vendor information, but there isn't any line item information filled in. So this window could contain sensitive information that maybe you don't want shared broadly across your organization. So you do have the ability to secure this window. It is a regular dexterity form that gets loaded, and so going in and assigning security to who for this window is recommended and not giving necessarily access to everybody within your company. So only those that probably can see this data, like in a service invoicing window, those would be the ones you probably want to allow access to this window. So lots of lines, lots of data you can view in here, especially if you're looking for specific transactions. So we'll collapse that. So we're back to the 1 line per transaction. There are some other things for drilling down and being able to see some more information. You'll notice here's the little asterisk next to this particular purchase order entry. And those are the entries you will see the asterisk next to. That means there are related transactions. And so let's go ahead and select that, see what that's all about. Down here, you'll see 2 related transactions, and it's in blue, so you can drill down on this underline here. As well as over here, there's an icon that allows you to view related transactions as well. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to drill in here. So what we're saying is for this purchase order line, we also have transactions of a receiving, a shipment for receiving those in, as well as we did an invoice against that purchase order. And you can see the cost and billing information associated with those. So when you transfer this purchase order line, it's actually transferring the purchase order header, I guess I'll call it, and then the actual shipment and the receipt, the invoice, are all going to be transferred from the one service call to the other if you mark this during the transfer process. Okay. The other thing to note is down here on the bottom, related transaction totals are also being incremented as you do your selections, as well as so are the totals on the first line as you select different transactions. I don't know if you can see on the small screen, but they are getting bigger as I select. Also too, if you are transferring, let's say, everything from a particular service call, and that's what you've done the limit up here or the filter, you can just mark this box here on the left here, and it's asking if you want to mark everything, keeping in mind that I said labor has to go over to labor in non-labor, it goes into non-labor cost elements. And so that's what it's asking. Okay, do you really want to mark everything or just labor or non-labor? So if we go ahead and say labor, it's going to change it and just mark the labor transactions. So we won't be doing that. We'll unmark that. And again, but it's just if you wanted to do everything that's listed down here, it's a quick, easy way to get everything marked. And obviously unmarked as well by just unchecking that box. Well, let's go ahead and mark a couple transactions. Let's do this material one here. We see we got $1,000 for that material. Notice when I have selected down here on the left-hand side, I have two more icons up here on the top, transferring to job and transferring to service call. So again, those are only available when you have something marked that you can choose to do that. So the first time around, let's go ahead and choose transfer to service call. Let me get this window up. And again, some of these options will look familiar because down here, records selected, total cost, total billable, you'll see that same information down here on the bottom. As well as related transactions, we said are only really coming into play when you do purchase order documents. And that second line down here, related transaction totals, also shows here as well. So again, just kind of bringing it to your forefront of this is the amount that you're transferring from a cost perspective, as well as billable at this point. And one note is your billable will be recalculated as it goes from one service call to the other based on your price matrix that you have on those service calls. So your billable might be $1,000, but it may change as it gets transitioned over into a new service call if it's using, let's say, a different price matrix. All right, so at this point, we would choose what service call we are going to transfer to. And I've created some new ones today, so let's bring that up. And all you do is click transfer. And again, it's transferring the one transaction that we had created or marked here on the left and transferred it over. And then it'll reset your screen in case you needed to do multiples while you're in here. So let's go and take a look at the service call that we transferred to. Trying to remember which one it was. I believe it was this one. We'll go ahead and take a look. All right, if you remember, I know we said $1,000 was what it had for a billable, but it only had a $6 cost on it. And so you'll see it had brought that transaction over and it had recalculated the billing amount. So bringing that information over, recalculating it based on this price matrix, which is standard, and I believe the other one probably had preferred on it, and recalculating those dollar amounts. It also created a general ledger transaction because again, we're taking cost from one service call, which may have been, a different division than what we're transferring to. So we need to account for those costs and actually create a GL distribution of taking it out of one division and potentially putting it into a second division. So it will create those entries as well as reverse it out of your other service call when you post those transactions. So Sandy, any questions in our question pane?
Sorry, had to find my mute button. No, no questions yet at this point. So you're good to keep going.
All right. Well, again, just to recap on select cost transfer, very powerful tool. As we can see, we can take transactions and physically move them from one service call to the other. And as far as going to a job as well, same thing. When you come into the select cost transfer window here, again, you could select a transaction just like we did before, and then transfer to job. And there's a couple different questions we have to answer here on this one. So the top portion is the same. Again, related transactions only if we're using purchase order. But now we have to put in job information, where before we just selected a service call to transfer to. So let's go ahead and choose a job here. And then we can say, okay, where do we want it transferred to within job cost? What cost element? Because we're doing materials, that makes sense. We'll go to material. And then on that particular job, then you have to choose what cost code you would want this sent over into. So let's go ahead and say we're going to send it to this one. And then click transfer. So again, it does the same thing as the service side. It's physically moving the transaction off of the service call. I'm basically saying it's creating a negative on the service call and taking that cost information and sending it over to job cost. Again, depending on your job cost billing, because again, you can have all different types in there on each of the different jobs, it will recalculate billing amounts if it needs to, if you're doing transaction level billing, or it will leave your billing at 0 if you're using user define, let's say, or any of the other options. All right, so that is select cost transfer. Let's take a look at the other side in job cost and go to select job transfer. Bring that window up. And this one, there's less options on top, but again, the same amount of power in the window. So here I've selected job 1001 in our sample data. And again, if there's transactions you're looking for, you can narrow the criteria down by putting in a date restriction on top. Because if you know, oh, I posted it last week or last, 2 weeks ago, you can put in that date restrictions and mark that, as well as the cost elements again. And you can mark which ones you want to see down here in the bottom portion of the window. Multi-selection here, again, we have the ability to mark everything. Same question. And we're actually not going to mark them. Or again, the putting multiple lines on, just like your header here. So again, you can see your vendor information, your employee information. Again, if you're drilling down and looking for something in particular, and that will come in handy. Let's say in this case, we know Brian posted to the wrong job. So we're looking for Brian's transactions. You can see that employee information down here versus taking off Alice's transaction, which isn't the same one that you want to do. And sometimes those dollar amounts might be the same. So again, you might have to drill in and get more information. We have the ability to do related transactions on purchase orders, just like we did on the service side. Let me find here. There we go. So we see the receiving transaction here. Let me go ahead and for related transactions. So here you can see that this one does have a receipt against it as well. So again, we're taking the PO header information and the receipt information over into job cost. And this is more receipt driven on the job cost side, but again, you can see the PO is listed with it. And that's what the asterisk means, is if there's related transactions. So if you don't have an asterisk, it may not have been any, no receivings will have been done against that purchase order. We have a sort by at the bottom as well, just by job number. And again, if there are additional sorts that you would be interested in getting, we would love to give that feedback. On the job cost side, we didn't have as many options or didn't think there would be as many options that people wanted to sort by. But again, if you wanted to sort by source, maybe an option up here, like where does this transaction come from, or by the transaction number. Again, love to hear that feedback if that would be additional sorting options you would like to see in this window. As far as functionality of the window, when to transfer to a job, in order to have that option, we must select a transaction down here. We'll go ahead and select this PM transaction. Let's see. There we go. Can mark a couple of them. Oh, I got payroll and PM. Remember I said payroll labor has to go to labor, and then the non-labor has to go to a non-labor. And so it'll come up and tell you that if you try to transfer two different types, the labor and non-labor, it'll ask you to choose which one do you really want to do. because again, you can only specify one cost code when you're transferring to that new job, and it's either a labor or a non-labor cost code. So we'll go ahead and say we're going to do a PM transaction. We'll click transfer. And again, this is the same window you saw earlier in the select cost transfer window, right? Asking you for your job number, cost element, and cost code. So we'll go ahead and select here. And let's see, I think this is, yep, materials. And we are going to say, here you can see the cost element. We'll go into materials and select, and we'll click transfer. And the same for service as in job cost, where it's going to be taking and creating a GL transaction for you and transferring that cost potentially from one division to another, because again, your jobs could have different divisions on them, and that's really driving your GL posting accounts. But definitely wanting to make sure the cost that we're bringing from one job to the other is accounted for also within your GL accounting. So let's go ahead and bring up that new job I transferred to. And it was transfer to is the name of my job. Not sure if everyone caught that. Well, look here, we have posted cost of 600. And we can drill in and take a look. I can't remember which one we transferred to, but so you can see miscellaneous materials, what we transferred into. And again, we would be subtracting from the other job that we transferred from. Sandy, back to you. Are there questions over there?
Nope, Cheryl, no questions.
All
You
right.
just got it all, yeah, so clear.
Well, and it really is, I mean, a very useful, easy tool to use.
That's for sure. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, I think both of them really give you powerful tool, but yet easy to use. The other part that I didn't talk about yet is we keep track of all these transfers. So we have a history table that every time you transfer from one service call to a service call or service call to job or job to job, we are storing that data also in a historical table. And we also store who is making the transfers. And so if there's ever a question later of where did this transaction go, what happened, you can view that, take that particular table and view it in a smart list, print out reports, whatever you need to do with that data. So again, it just keeps track of that from an audit perspective, because again, we are changing dollar values on a service call and job, and we want to make sure that, again, it's identified on the GL side with the transaction, as well as historically, the changes that have happened on any particular service call or job. So again, I think that is very powerful, very cool, as well as it keeps track of, again, the user who's doing those transactions. So, all right, I'm wrapping up. Sandy, any other questions?
Nope. Wrap away.
All right, well, let's bring up the slideshow here. There's our question slide. Here's just from a communication standpoint, again, I would just say if you have questions on any of these tools that we've talked about today, please reach out to us at this phone number, sales@iscorp.biz, as well as even just going to our site. We have a whole section devoted to wsTOOLS, and it will take you through, Sandy's done all kinds of little clips, right, Sandy, of
I sure have.
tools. Yeah, do you want to
Yep.
talk a couple of those?
Well, pretty much all of our tools I have done 2-minute or so videos on, including some of our newer ones like Pay Correct and Journal Entry Hold and Void Maintenance, and all the, longtime favorites as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Sandy, for sharing that. Because, yeah, and I would say, any questions you have, check out those videos. And again, those 2-3 minute snippets of here's what the tool does, how you could use it, how could it improve efficiencies or make your life better. Check those out, as well as Sandy and I are starting a new initiative as well of sending out quarterly emails to our tools customers and
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
communicating what changes are coming. So for example, I talked about this historical select job transfer that's coming out, and that will be the place where we'll make the announcement, get out all the information, explain how to use it, how it's a little bit different than your current select job transfer. And again, we just want to make sure you have the latest information, and if you ever have questions about tools, reach out to us, as well as if there's a new tool you want to get installed, we'd be glad to help you. So again, thank you for joining this demo today, our webinar, as we wrap it up, and appreciate your time, spending time with us today. So thank you very much. Goodbye.